Hi, everyone. How is everyone doing today? Good? Is everyone on mute today? Well, I had two kids that woke up in the middle of the night last night. So my brain is not the sharpest it could be. But I took my Cognomag and I think today is going to go really well. And today we're going to make one of my favorite recipes. It's uh, it's generally called a French apple cake. So this is actually a recipe that I learned when I went to a cooking school in France. I spent a few days in an immersive program in Burgundy, and this was one of the cakes that we made there. It's one that I love it. It's one that you can make with or without a mixer, which is what I also really love about it. It's in one pan. It's just like one of those really simple cakes that's beautiful and delicious, but you can tell like a lot of thought went into it and a lot of love. And I feel like that's the perfect, thing recipe to go with when we were trying to decide recipes to make today. I feel like it was a really good one to go with that fit a lot of different people. Um, we have made this for several different dietary restrictions. So if you are gluten free, I recommend using a 1-to-1 flour sub. I've made it with Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. It works out great. If you are dairy free, I haven't tried it personally myself, but I've had people have a lot of luck with omitting the mascarpone cheese in it and instead using like their favorite butter sub or coconut oil even for the butter inside of it. And they say it's delicious. So I would recommend using oat milk instead of whole milk as a substitute. And yeah, so if you're here and you're trying to make it with those extra substitutions, go right ahead. If you are low sodium, just make sure you're using an unsalted butter and also check for your baking powder. Make sure that's low sodium too. Um, and I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's all the dietary restrictions. Obviously, this recipe works for people who are following a migraine elimination diet as well. I do want to note, and we can talk about this later, but this is a recipe that's best enjoyed with a full meal to avoid blood sugar spikes. So that is something that you want to think about when enjoying it. Maybe don't have it on an empty stomach, pair it with your dinner tonight with lots of protein and fat, and that would be great. So let's get started on this cake together. So my original goal was to make it into like a frozen, like the frozen movie snowflake. Um, Tried that earlier. It's like such a small space. It's really, really hard to get any sort of pattern going. So I think I've kind of figured out the best way to make a pattern on the top, and I'll show you how to do that. But it's not going to look exactly like the frozen snowflake, which I have to let that dream die, but that's okay. We're just pivoting, which we have to do a lot when cooking with migraine, right? As this class goes on, I love questions. Please feel free to ask questions throughout if you need me to demonstrate anything over again. I'm happy to do that. Just this is your time, this is your space. Like, ask all the questions you can. And that keeps me from talking to myself and rambling on. So, that being said, let's go ahead and start. I want you to have a 9-inch cake pan. And then also set your ovens for 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So we can start with that, get that oven preheated, and get our cake pans ready. So we are just going to use one cake pan for this recipe. You should have, the instructions in the email should have let you know that your butter needs to be at room temperature. It also helps if the cheese is at room temperature, as well as the eggs. So hopefully we're working with that. It makes it a lot easier to mix, especially if you're not using an electric mixer. You are also going to grab a sheet of parchment paper, and I am going to move my camera a little bit so you guys can see what I'm doing down here. And we are just going to cut out a sheet of parchment paper for the bottom of our cake pan so that it is non-stick at the bottom. So I'll kind of show you that here. All right. So I'm just going to put my parchment paper under my cake pan and then use pen, pencil, whatever, just to kind of draw a circle around it. You're going to take that out and then just cut out your circle piece. And the crafting part is supposed to come later, so you can keep all this stuff around for later when we do the crafting section. So this should fit directly into the bottom of your pan. And this is because you'll want to eventually pop out this cake very easily so that you can serve it on a nice platter, because it'll be very beautiful. So for holiday parties and everything, you don't want to leave it directly in the cake pan, and this will help you be able to pop it out and still reserve that like beautiful top into it. So this should fit nicely in the bottom of your cake pan. And then what I usually do is use the wrapper from the butter. I'm using Kerrygold butter for this. I really like it. It's you can get at Costco, and that's probably like the best deal I found on it, because it can be a little bit expensive, but I love that it has like no additives or flavoring in it too. So I'm just gonna run it along the edges of the pan and also over the parchment paper too, just all around the inside of your pan, coating it thoroughly. If you don't have a wrapper, you can just use a small like pat of butter. You can use oil if you're doing this dairy-free, anything that'll kind of grease the inside.
So, Alicia, can I ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
Why would you use that versus like Pam spray or something?
Oh, I basically like to use butter for the flavoring. I guess you could use a spray if you like. I tend to try to keep vegetable oils to like a minimum on here, but if that makes it easier for you to cook, that would definitely work too. You just want to be careful, like with some types of oil, especially like avocado oils and stuff like that, because they can kind of flavor your cake. So we wouldn't want that to affect the overall flavor of the cake.
Okay, thanks.
Um, sure, we're just gonna use like a tiny little spoonful of flour, and this is kind of fun. You just shake it around your pan like this, and it should stick to that butter or oil, whatever you're using, and help to kind of create another like nice little nonstick barrier, so the cake should pop out really easily. So this is what it'll look like, kind of lightly covered in oil or in flour. And then once you're finished with that, you can just dump any excess flour back into your flour container. Okay, so let's see what's next. We dumped out the excess flour in a medium bowl. Let's do our dry ingredients first, and I can show you how to measure that. So we want to combine our dry ingredients and wet ingredients separately. This is just to help to mix everything evenly. And a lot of times with cake, we want to avoid over mixing, which can cause things to rise really quickly and then deflate. So we want kind of a nice, even cake when we're baking this. Let me think. Okay. This is where my brain is very slow today. So let's talk about measuring flour. Obviously, like the most accurate way you could do baking is to have a scale and use scale measurements, but we're cooking with migraine here. So like going through that, some people do find it easier. I'm one of those people that like gets irritated with it. I just kind of want to go through the motions with measuring and pouring into the cup. I also find that to be somewhat soothing too, especially during attacks. So that's what I'm going to kind of show you how to most accurately measure your dry ingredients today. I love these little wax paper sheets for stuff like this. They make for really easy cleanup. You can get these at Costco too. And especially if that like helps you have less things to do, less areas to make this lower effort, that's definitely something that I would recommend doing. So you don't have a ton of flour to clean up at the end of this. I am going to measure out 1 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour here. So a lot of people, when they're measuring flour, they will just take their bag of flour, scoop their cup in, right? And then take their knife and measure it out. That's not what we want to do, because that can actually have you incorporating a lot more flour than the recipe calls for. So if your baked goods are turning out pretty dry, or they're not turning out as gooey as the recipe says, that could definitely be a factor in why they're turning out that way. So we want to take a spoon, measure out the flour into our measuring cup. This is my 3/4 cup measuring cup. I also really like Williams Sonoma. It's a little more expensive, but they have odd measuring spoons and cups and stuff like that, so that it can save you a lot of time. I have yet to find one that's 1 3/4, but I do have one that's 1.5. And so I really like that one for other types of recipes. So again, another like time saving tip that you can do. So we just want to spoon and level and then pour that into our dry ingredient bowl. So I got my 3/4 cup here, and then I'm going to use my 1 cup. Where did my spoon go? Oh, there we go. And this is where I wait for my Cognimag to hopefully kick in, get my brain working. Okay. We're just going to measure this out too. Put that on there. And then I just kind of tap the flour in here so you can evenly spread it. Make sure it fills in all those little holes, and then level it off there. Put that in. So this is what's nice. So I'll show you. I can just pick this up, lift it, and pour it back into my flour bag. It's really easy cleanup. Okay. So next we're going to add a tablespoon of aluminum-free baking powder. I get comments all the time like, oh my gosh, a tablespoon? That seems like a lot. Yes, it does. And what you want to avoid when you're using that much baking powder, because we're not using any other leavening agent, is to make sure you get aluminum-free. Otherwise, if you're using this much baking powder in a recipe, like a lot of times I'll use a lot of baking powder for if I do oven baked wings, like chicken wings. And if you do this on low heat, it allows them to get like really crispy in the oven without even frying them. And so I have a recipe for that in my cookbook. But if you're using a large amount and you use one with aluminum in it, it can start to taste like heavy metal tasting. So you don't want that for our cake. So we are going to measure out. I just got this one at Whole Foods, but they have them. I've seen them multiple places. Like they have it at Target. I've seen it at Walmart. I've seen it at trying to think of what else you could. We have Kroger here. You could get it at Kroger.
Alicia, when would you want baking powder with aluminum?
I personally never use it.
Yeah.
It's like not one of those things that you know, I don't know how health conscious people are on this call. I'm always trying to avoid like using a lot of like heavy metals, and I avoid aluminum in my deodorant and stuff like that. I'm not sure how much that like correlates to migraine. Everyone believes different things, but I just try to avoid it in general, especially if there are good alternatives like this. So that's just kind of what I would recommend. But there's no time that like I would really recommend using one with aluminum. I can't find my tablespoon measurement. Oh, here it is.
Alicia, there's a few comments that people got the wrong kind. So what do you recommend?
Oh, I would hold on this recipe until you can find one that's aluminum free. It's basically made of cornstarch and baking soda, but I'm not exactly sure what the conversion rate would be. I would have to Google that to make sure that we're using the right amounts, and I don't think we have that kind of time today. The other thing is you could try to cut back on it, but I'm not sure your cake would rise the same way, especially on different altitudes. I know we're all calling in from different places. So I would just make it, I would just try to make it later because I don't want your cake to taste bad, especially after all this effort. I've never made it with aluminum cake or aluminum baking powder before, but if you want to try it, you could. I just worry because I have gotten like some feedback here and there that someone used it one time on my website, and they could taste it. So now I worry that people can taste it, and I just try to give all the tips beforehand. So that would be my recommendation. Obviously, you can do whatever you want to do. It's not going to affect the outcome of the cake. If you want to use one with aluminum, I would just it just might affect the flavor there. So that would be my recommendation. I'm sorry, I thought that was in the list of things that we talked about for the ingredients, but maybe it got missed or something. So I apologize for that. We're gonna add okay, I haven't added this yet. Got distracted. Oh, this is 1.5 tablespoons. Okay, so this is great. Let me see. Oh, there it is. Okay. See, this is what happens when you have too many odd measuring. You get confused. Okay. So here we are. We're just going to measure this out, the baking powder. I hope not too many people have that issue, and you can still cook along. All right, we're going to use that.
I always like to think that it's only one meal out of my life. Like, how many other meals are we eating in our whole lives, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I just don't want it to taste bad. That's the only thing. So I would, if you're cooking along, you really want to make it, I would try to decrease it to maybe 2 teaspoons, and let's see if that works. If you still want to join us and everything, but I haven't tested that yet. So please don't like yell at me if it doesn't turn out. Okay, so we have the baking powder. We're going to add a little bit of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon. If you are using anything besides kosher salt, like if you're using like a table salt, a Morton's table salt, which is very fine, definitely decrease this to about like 1/4 teaspoon, okay? It's much more concentrated salty flavor. And let me make sure I'm doing that. Okay, so my dry ingredients here, I am just going to use my spoon to kind of mix that all together.
Hey, Alicia, I have a question about salt. So
yes.
How do you decide when to use kosher salt and or table salt?
So I just use kosher salt in this recipe because it's what I usually like to cook with. Generally a lot of baking recipes use table salt. It's just, all my recipes tend to be kosher, so I like to just stick with that because I know people usually have it on hand if they're cooking this way. But you could obviously switch back and forth between them. Table salt, again, is usually used in baking. It's more of a concentrated, like fine salt. So it's got a lot more salty flavor, like for the amount that you're using. Even with kosher salt, it changes. Like with my cookbook, my first cookbook, the Dizzy Cook, there is a kosher salt called Diamond Crystal. And that's kind of what all the chefs use. You'll see it. Ina Garten uses it in all her cookbooks. I've seen a note in Chrissy Teigen's cookbooks before. You'll see kind of a note at the beginning of their cookbook, which I'm not sure everyone reads, but that they use Diamond Kosher. And it's basically the size of the crystals are very, are a little bit it can vary and make things either more salty or less salty depending on how fine they are. So diamond crystal usually uses a larger crystal so that it's like more of a mass that's less salty, if that makes sense in the mouth. I'm trying to figure out a good way to describe this. So compared to, I think most people buy like Morton's kosher salt, and that will be a little more salty for a kosher salt compared to diamond crystals. So I've seen people where they've been like, oh my gosh, Ina uses too much salt in her recipes. Well, it's because she uses diamond kosher, and it's overall a less salty salt, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So it does matter which brand you use when you're buying kosher salt versus table salt versus like Morton's kosher salt. And then also like what's super trendy now are like Redmond's salt, which I've gotten asked a lot about that. And I haven't cooked with it a lot yet. But a lot of like mineral analysis people are kind of recommending that one too. So that's one I'm gonna have to explore and see how that like does in cooking too.
Hey Alicia, it's Dawn.
Hi.
Hey, so are your recipes using the diamond salt then?
Yeah, so generally I will use the diamond salt, but unfortunately, like for a while I couldn't find it. It was really difficult to find for a few months. So I kind of switched back to Morton's kosher, and then now I'm using diamond again. But usually in recipes on my website, what I will do is just leave it up to you to add the sodium, because I have a lot of people who have vestibular migraine and Meniere's disease, so they have to watch their sodium intake. So in that case, I try to, unless it needs to be added to like affect the flavoring, so like in things like cakes and stuff like that, I usually try to let you guys kind of do it based on what works for you and your diet, that sort of thing.
Okay, so but for the baking, we should stick to diamonds then, because I'm not a baker, so I need to know this.
Oh yeah. You know what? If you have Morton's today, I wouldn't worry about it. It's not going to make a huge difference in the flavoring of everything today. But for other recipes, like if you're using it in cooking or like salting your meats beforehand, that's when I would pay more attention to that.
Great, good tip. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Okay, so we got our dry ingredients ready to go. I think today I'm actually going to use my mixer, but if not, you can use, is there anyone here that doesn't have a mixer, or are they just doing it by hand? That wants to see it by hand, or does it matter?
I was too lazy to grab my mixer, but I can.
You don't need to. You can definitely mix it by hand. I do find it works a little bit faster if I'm doing it with my bowl. So I'm going to show you it just with the mixer, but it's the same thing by hand. So don't worry if you're, I do find a wooden spoon tends to work better if you're mixing by hand. So I would definitely use that. We are going to whisk together the, okay.
Did we put the sugar in the dry mix? Oh, let me hang on a second. Did we put the sugar in the dry mix yet, or is that still?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We will mix that into our butter mixture. What I'm going to do is just kind of, and I'll do this to get this kind of thinned out, is we're going to mix in our cheese to our milk. Okay, so I have a cup of milk that I have here, and then I'm going to mix in my cheese. Where did that go? Oh, here it is. He's here. And again, if you're doing this dairy-free, I would recommend using oat milk for this recipe just because of it from like a texture and a taste standpoint. But I'll talk about that in a second. Let me see. I have a quarter cup here. Okay. Okay, so this is just a part of the recipe that they used when we were in France. We got this. It's mascarpone is like a Italian cream cheese. So it's basically like regular cream cheese, but with like full fat milk or cream. And it's just like super decadent, really light compared to cream cheese. I mean, the flavor is just like really fantastic. I see a lot of people are like, oh, what do I do with like the rest of it? You can do so much for this. You could serve it on a cheese board for the holidays. This goes well. It's most commonly used in like tiramisu. But I also just like put out a recipe on my website for mascarpone pasta. So I like to use it as kind of a sub for aged cheese or Parmesan. It doesn't have the same flavor, obviously, but it can be used to make like a really creamy pasta without using heavy cream. So that's kind of nice too. So I'll just kind of measure this in my quarter cup.
Alicia, we have a question in the chat. Someone wants to know if they can use Greek yogurt instead.
You could use Greek yogurt, I think. It may have a little more tanginess to it once you bake it, but I think it would be a good sub. I personally find I'm triggered by Greek yogurt and yogurt in general, so that's why I like avoid baking with it. But even like regular cream cheese would work, but there are some textural differences. I don't think it'll be enough to cause any issues with the overall turnout of your cake, but I haven't tried it yet. So.
And Jamie was also asking if she doesn't use cheese or a cheese substitute, does she need to adjust her oat milk?
No, it should just work. From what people have told me, it should just work without it. I just find it to be like a little less like moist, I would guess, in the crumb of the cake, but it's obviously not enough to where people get upset about it. So we just kind of whisk this in together, and if your cheese is at room temperature in your milk, it helps because it's like nice and smooth, basically. Only if you notice that your cake batter is like really dry and hard to work with, would I add a little bit more milk, but you should be fine without. Okay, so we got that set up. I am going to use my butter. So I have my room temperature butter here.
And there was a question of how much milk.
How much milk? You're using 1 cup of milk. Okay. So we have the butter in here, and I am going to add a little bit of sugar. I'm going to add 3/4 cup of white sugar. Actually, something that I found in Costco recently were whole vanilla beans, and they were a really good price. Normally they're like so expensive. I rarely get them, but they were a really good price. And I don't know if they're just around for the holiday season or what, but what I like to do, I would love it in this cake instead of using, you know, the vanilla extract. You could use the whole vanilla beans and just scrape out the vanilla beans. And then what I like to do is dry the vanilla beans and like leave them out just overnight for like a day or two until they're kind of like dry and crunchy, and then stick it into your sugar canister. And it is, it'll give you like vanilla scented sugar. That's like amazing if you know, like to mix it in coffee or just cook with it. It's delicious for baking, especially.
Can you use the vanilla bean paste instead of the extract in this recipe?
Yes, you could.
Or
actually, I don't know what the conversion rate would be. It should be on the bottle that you're using. It will kind of tell you what a conversion is. Let me see. Okay, 3/4 cup. So we're doing 3. Wait. Oh, geez. Okay. So I used the wrong 3/4 cup. This is what I get. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oops, sorry guys. I measured into the wrong.
That light's not working.
I measured into the wrong. I had 1 cup of sugar, which isn't the worst thing. Just be very sweet. I generally like to use in my recipes the least amount of sugar that we can get away with, while still preserving the textural integrity of whatever we cook with. I do find like some comments on recipes will be like, oh my gosh, I took this down to like, I omitted half the sugar or whatever, and it was like dry and crumbly, and they forget that a lot of sugar is actually used to maintain the textural integrity of a lot of baked goods. And so just like keep that in mind when you try to edit recipes, that like I do think here in America we use like too much sugar and sweets, and you'll notice like with European baked goods recipes online and stuff, they tend to use a little less sugar is what I find, or they're like not as sweet. Whereas if you go somewhere on here, like, oh, what's a really popular one, like Sally's Baking Blog, I love her, but like they use so much sugar in it. So usually you can edit it back a little bit, but you just want to be careful about that, so that you don't, ruin that integrity of your baked goods. So I'm just going to take this over to my electric mixer and mix this until it's light and creamy.
Alicia, did you already put the butter in?
Yeah, no, not yet. So that's what I'm doing. I'm mixing together the butter and the sugar in my mixer, and I can move you guys.
It's in the mixer with the sugar.
Okay.
Yeah, let me move you guys. If you are sensitive to movement, just close your eyes for a little bit, and I'll let you know when it's down again. Okay. Don't like me. Okay. So here we go. I have my butter and sugar in there. And I'm just going to cream these together. So this might take about a minute or two to get it light and fluffy. Especially if you're hand mixing, it'll probably take a little bit longer. And then we're going to add 1 egg and 2 teaspoons of vanilla to this. I will say if you're using a wooden spoon, this is like a really good workout for your arms. There was something I was going to say about the cheese. Oh, when you're choosing like a mascarpone cheese or like a cream cheese, one thing that I would note is to look on the ingredients and just make sure that it doesn't contain carrageenan. Carrageenan tends to be one of those food additives I see bother people a lot more than others. And there's always alternatives that are so readily available. It just doesn't make sense to use it in your cooking. So that's one thing that I would watch out for when you're looking. A lot of mascarpone cheeses use citric acid to kind of form it into cheese. I do occasionally find some people are triggered by citric acid. There are a few brands that don't include it. I know Vermont Creamery is one of them. So that's just something to be aware of as you cook and shop, depending on your own personal food triggers. So this looks pretty good. It's light and fluffy. Let me turn this off, and then we're going to add 1 egg here. All right. And then after we add eggs, we want to make sure that we're not going to over mix anything, that we don't get too much air into our batter. So we're just going to slowly mix this to incorporate it in. And then we're going to add our 2 teaspoons of vanilla here. I'm actually using an alcohol-free vanilla. I find it doesn't really matter for baked goods, but if you're using vanilla in goods that aren't baked, you know, sometimes people can be really sensitive to the alcohol. So that's just something to be aware of. Trader Joe's has a good one. But obviously, like, you could use the fresh vanilla beans too, if that tends to be an issue for you. Okay, so we just want to mix that together till it's smooth and incorporated. All right, here we go. Are there any questions? Let me try to think. There was something else I was going to say, but I don't remember what it was. Cheese. I talked about cheese.
Okay. Olivia's raising her hand. She has a question. I don't know what it is. Okay, Olivia, ask a question.
My question is, what happens if you put too much of an ingredient in?
Too much of an ingredient?
Yeah.
Which ingredient?
Yeah, which one? Too much of which one? How about if we put in too much flour?
What
Too much.
flour?
Do we put in too much flour?
Yeah.
She's just wondering what would happen.
Oh, you might just get a really dry cake.
It will taste dry.
Yeah, and it'll kind of crumble more.
Enough of enough flour.
That's right.
If I don't have enough flour?
Yeah, if not enough flour, you have to empty some of flour.
Then it won't firm up as well.
Yeah, we need the exact amount.
The flour one is important, but you can always add a little more sugar if you'd like. That one would work too. And I'm one of those people who also thinks vanilla is kind of like garlic, where you measure it with your heart. So, like, feel free. If you're a big vanilla fan.
Oh yeah, I'm always
right.
having extra vanilla.
Yeah. Although I do get some people, I love to add more garlic to my recipes than probably is necessary. And then I get some people who add more and then they're like, okay, it was too much. Okay, so I'm going to move you guys back over here. So just look away if you're bothered by movement. And I'll let you guys know when we're set down again. Okay, so we have our wet ingredients here. Obviously, we're just doing it until they're just mixed together. So it should look something like this. Okay.
The milk and the cheese still separate?
Yes, the milk and the cheese are still separate.
One of a milk and a cheese and a sugary butter egg mixture.
Yes, so we should have 3 separate bowls. So what we're going to do is actually alternate adding these together, okay? So I am going to add a little bit of the flour mixture first to my butter and egg mixture. Okay, and then I'm just going to stir this together. You can obviously use your mixer if you'd like to do this. I'm just going to do half and half so people can see if they are hand mixing too. We'll get our arm workout in for the day. And then I'm going to stir in a little bit of the cheese and milk here. Okay, and we're just going to keep alternating these until it's like fully combined and smooth. Just kind of like, I know there's like that famous scene, we just watched it the other day on Schitt's Creek. So if you ever watch Schitt's Creek, they're like learning how to cook in the kitchen. It's the mom and her son, they've never had to cook before, and they're like trying to cook enchiladas together. And one of the recipes talks about how to fold in the cheese. And they're like, what does that mean? Fold in the cheese. And she's like, well, David, just fold it in. And so I was trying to tell people, this is essentially what it means, like folding in the cheese. You just want this kind of like motion. I guess I don't know why they call it folding it in. It's like a nice little wrist action here. So we're gonna fold in our cheese and milk here with our flour mixture too. One thing like I really loved about this program that I attended was the overall like mindset of baking and cooking in France. Basically, it's a little bit different than you would get, you know, in some of the bigger cities like Paris. But it's all about like sourcing really good ingredients and then taking a lot of time to enjoy the ritual of cooking, and then also taking a lot of time to like enjoy all that hard work that you just did, and like sitting down at a meal together and like making it an event where you just really enjoy either your own company or everyone else's company, as well as what you made. And I've really like tried to adopt that into my life, like cooking with Migraine too. Is I find that it's like much less stressful for me and more of a rewarding experience when I just like focus on going through the motions and I'm not like under time constraints or feeling rushed or like super hungry and, you know, I just need to like eat something really quick. In that case, I just try to have a snack before I start cooking, because otherwise I'm like trying to rush and I'm angry and it's just not as enjoyable of an experience for me. So I'll try to do a snack with a little bit of protein, like some cottage cheese or like even just like a mozzarella cheese stick or something like that, before I even start. And that seems to help the process and just like make me a little bit more relaxed and help with my blood sugar too. But I just think like cooking with Migraine can be a lot more enjoyable if we just like take some time to kind of savor the process and use it more as like a mindful activity. So just doing stuff like this where we're, you know, incorporating one element into another element. This is the kind of thing that helped me a lot with like my vestibular symptoms because I was looking from one bowl to another and just kind of focusing on like the task at hand. And it helped me to forget a little bit about my symptoms. I don't know if forget is the right word, but just sort of take my mind off my symptoms and like focusing on the task at hand, which is just like mixing these two things rather than like all the garbage we deal with, trying to deal with going through migraine and making sure we eat all the right things. And it's just a lot to deal with. So that's why I really enjoy stuff like this. Because it's just, it can be such a mindful practice. And then at the end of it, like you can be really proud of what you made. And like making something as beautiful as like this cake and like sharing that with something else, like can just give you such a sense of accomplishment. And I think that sometimes that's hard to deal with when you're going to doctor's appointments and you just feel like so out of control. It's like kind of nice to know if you mix these things together, it should turn out pretty good. Let's hope. Okay. So any other questions? So this is kind of what the batter should look like. There may be like a few little like lumps and bumps, but it should be overall pretty smooth. And like light and fluffy. Okay, so we are going to pour this into our cake pan. Okay. Is everyone's cake going really well? I hope so.
Looks like everyone's doing well.
Okay, good. Yeah,
everyone's really focused.
If you are hand mixing, you may have a little more lumps and bumps than like the other mixers, but I've made this both ways, and unless it's like clumps of flour, which you don't want. But if it's just like butter and cheese, usually that tends to melt when it's baking, and it's actually quite nice. I mean, that's why you use cool butter in a lot of pastries, like or if you're like making biscuits, a lot of them will have you use like ice cold butter and use it, chop it up really fine, and when you make your dough, and that's so the butter can like get evenly kind of incorporated throughout, and then as it's baking, it melts, and it melts into the mixture as it's baking, and just it makes it really, gives it a really lovely texture. Okay, there we go. So that's kind of what your cake should look like. It shouldn't be too high up. You want it to just mix, probably fill like half of the cake pan, okay? Because this is gonna rise quite a bit. If yours is up to the top, I would just recommend, it shouldn't be, because if you're using a 9-inch cake pan, it should be the same. But if for some reason yours is up to the top, I would make sure that you put a cookie sheet or something like that under it as it bakes, because you don't want it to spill over and then cause your oven to, you know, burn, and then you're swearing at me, and I don't want that. So, but yeah, it should look like this. Okay, so I have a little bit of apple slice. Let's talk a little bit about apples. I love Honeycrisp apples. They're like everywhere right now. I feel like everyone has their apple that they really, really like, right? Sometimes you're a Granny Smith person. I don't know who those people are. If you're on here, I'd love to meet you. Sometimes you're a Granny Smith person. Sometimes you are a Gala apple person. Sometimes you're a Fuji apple person. This cake works well depending on what apple person you are. Although I would say, like, I think Granny Smith is a little too tart for this. Those are like better in pies. But I really love Honeycrisp for this cake. But like I said, you could use whatever apple is your favorite on here. I find Honeycrisp has a good flavor, like a good balance of flavor that's like kind of tart and sweet at the same time. But any apple will work. What we want to do is just have some of it already sliced. I find that you could either use either one large apple or two smaller apples. I'm just going to take a peeler and then just kind of peel my apple a little bit. Okay. And then we're going to just do like thin slices. Any questions so far? It sounds like everyone's doing pretty well.
We have a question in the chat, and it's
okay.
Why peel versus leaving the skin on?
Okay, so that's a really good question, actually. I find peeling, when you are like making a cake like this, the last thing you want to do, like when someone bites into it, is have that peel that won't break apart in their mouth, especially for like a light cake. You don't want that. And so that's where I find peeling to be very important. If you're just using apples in like a chicken salad or something else like that, I totally leave the skin on. But for this cake, I feel like you don't want to run into that textural problem. Unless you're just making it for you and you don't mind that, then feel free to go ahead and leave them on. That's the thing. That's the thing about recipes. My mom is very much, she likes to follow the recipe exactly and be very much by the book. And you have to be a little more careful in baking, I will admit, because if you make changes in baking, sometimes things don't always work out. But usually you can edit recipes to to really fit your needs, you know, and they may not turn out the best. Like obviously as a recipe developer, I know you want to, I think of things like when I ask you to use things like whole full fat milk, that's just me thinking about the best flavor and texture. But, you know, they're always you know, and that's where I approach recipes too. But, you know, you got to make sometimes recipes work for your diet and your own needs and stuff like that. And that's where you can, you know, look into substitutes and try them out. And they may not have the like best top texture and flavor, but at the end of the day, they can still be pretty good. So it's all about trying to find that balance with what works for you and what's best for your diet, as well as, you know, balancing those taste and textural elements too. Okay, so this is how I did this. So I have a bunch of my apples like thinly sliced. And actually, one thing I learned when I was recipe testing, I have a apple fennel salad on my website. And one of the things that I learned when I was recipe testing is to actually store, if you ever have to store sliced apples, is just to store them in water, like cool water. And that should keep them from browning, especially if you do this like way before, and then just drain them and pat them dry. There's like this, I think like the old school way of doing that was like to mix a bunch of lemon juice in that. And, but that changes the flavor significantly on apples. And then also like, I know some people who follow my website find lemon to be a trigger for them. So again, just put them in cool water and it doesn't change the flavor or anything. Just make sure you dry them off really well after. Okay, so how I kind of did this, let me see if I can remember. But I kind of made like a little bit of a cross to start with. So we did just kind of have these apples in like a little cross pattern. And it helps to get them as thin as possible. So I'll kind of show you. You could use a mandolin, but I just thinly slice them. Let me show you also a quick tip while I'm thinking about it. So if you've come to my cooking classes before, you know this, you can just ignore me. But basically, whenever you are using a knife, like a sharp chef's knife, I always tell people like you're usually probably holding it wrong. Like a lot of us sit and we cut like this, right? Way back here. Okay. And that's not how you want to cut your knives. Like it leaves you open to, I'm sorry, cut your food. It leaves you open, especially when you're chopping very hard things like carrots and stuff like that. It leaves you open to not having as much control over your knife. And especially if you're dealing with dizziness or a migraine attack, you have no like security over that. And it can lead to more accidents basically. So how you should be holding your knife is to grip up on the neck of the knife like this, secure it with your thumb on one side and your pointer finger on the other. And that gives you a lot more control, especially when you have to like thinly slice things, if that makes sense. So it'll also give you more control as you are like cutting and everything. And like, I hate to say this in case there are any men on the call, but like knives are really designed for men's hands to hold, which is crazy to me because I feel like, I mean, I would love to know how many people on this call are women or have smaller hands in general. So it's like they should make smaller handed knives. And I actually had one formulated. You can kind of see the difference. So I had one, and there's a company in Austin, near Austin, that does it. And they formulated it specifically for my hand. And you can see like the size difference between the two knives. It's kind of crazy, but yeah, can you all see that? Am I like blocking it? But yeah, like crazy how much longer the other one is. So this is like the standard knife, and this is
Are you going to market that, Alicia?
I would love to.
Do it.
Yeah, I don't think people just don't understand like how these small things like make a difference, but they really do. like having that knife has made like a huge difference in the way I cook. It just makes cooking more enjoyable if you have tools that make it a lot easier, you know, like the weird measuring amounts and stuff like that.
Yep.
Okay.
So if you wanted to get better at your knife skills, what would you recommend?
Oh, I would recommend going to like a local cooking class. Like some good ones. If you are in Texas, Central Market has some really good cooking classes. Sur La Table has some ones that are more like date night focused, but like I think you could definitely roll up there and take one by yourself. And then there are usually like culinary education programs. If you live in larger cities, or even like a community college might have programs there too. But they can kind of show you, they'll teach you like these basics. This is kind of like the basics you learn in cooking school too. But you can do that without having to go to like a big culinary program, like, you know, community classes, or even like you can learn some of these basics at like the Sur La Table that they should teach you. I'm not sure. I've taken a few at Central Market, and I'm not sure they get into it that much. They more focus on like it being fun and like date night stuff, but sometimes you'll get a teacher who will be really into that, and you can ask them questions on how to show you that too.
Yeah, my daughter and I went to a local place, and the chef, she made sure to really instruct us with the knife and how to hold it properly and do all that.
Perfect. Okay, that's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it makes such a difference when you cut, and I especially like when I was cooking a lot, when I was really, really dizzy all the time, it just made such a difference in helping me feel more secure, and actually like was a little bit grounding to know how to use it properly. So that's one tip I always like to include in my classes. Okay. So what I'm going to do, you just want to make like a little bit of a cross with your apples. So I'm just going to layer them. I'm going to do like kind of a double layer, I think, here. I'm not sure this is like, we'll see how this turns out. Hopefully beautiful. Okay. So you can kind of see, can you guys kind of see what I'm doing? So I'm just laying these in kind of a cross pattern. And then how this worked for me earlier was like, I started to go in the middle with like layering the apples. So just kind of slide them, try to get somewhat even pieces, slide them on top of each other, layer them, then like one under the next. Okay. And they can just lay like right on top of your cake, because as the cake lifts up, it's going to go around all of these apples and kind of fill in. So it's also okay if it doesn't look completely perfect. I just want to layer these. Okay, kind of like in a little bit of a starburst pattern. Okay, can y'all see that? Okay, so then we have like the edges of our snowflake on the outside, and then I'm gonna come in here on the edges and just kind of layer more apples underneath. So like here, I'll layer another apple. And then you can kind of customize your snowflake to however you want it to look once you have that cross and those middle pieces down. Slightly
so pretty.
There. It does turn out like after this is baked. Oh my gosh, you guys, it's like beautiful. And it's so easy. I mean, I would do this over like frosted cakes any single day. Every single day. I just like looks really impressive for not that much effort. I don't know, something about just having to make frosting to me is like so exhausting. Okay. So I just add, like what I'm kind of doing is adding a few, just like adding on to a few of my like little starbursts on the outside, just adding a few to kind of fill in. and I think I'm gonna stop there, but if you wanted to, like the normal recipe just kind of has you fill it in all around. Yeah, and you can also like, you can make this with all different types of fruit. So I really like it with apples in the fall. I've seen some people do cherries. I really like in the spring to use like strawberries. Summer it works great with peaches. So you can really substitute out any kind of fruit you want. The other thing that you want to do is to just add a little bit of sprinkle of sugar on the top. And that'll get these like nice and kind of caramelized and really pretty brown color. Just a tiny bit. Okay, so this is kind of what mine looks like. And then we're gonna put this in the oven. This bakes for about 55 minutes, so it is a long time. I'm not sure we will get around to showing you how it's made unless craft time runs really long. But if you want to, you can always upload pictures. I don't know if we can have like a hashtag or something that we could all use. But I'm gonna throw this in the oven now. It'll be at 350 for about 55 minutes.
Alicia, do you have a link for this recipe so people can follow along if they missed any of this?
Yes, on the dizzycook.com, it's just called the French apple cake.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put the link in there then.
I have a
Okay,
question.
that's perfect.
I never
Yes.
using the powdered sugar. Is that for the end?
Yes, so the powdered sugar at the end, once that'll be when it completely cools down. And I'll show you because I don't think we'll get to it. If you try to do it when it's too hot, it'll basically just melt the sugar. So I don't think we'll have time to like cook it and have it cool. But if you have like a sifter on hand, or if you have just a fine mesh strainer or anything like that, what you want to do is scoop in the powdered sugar to this and just kind of dust it over the top, and it'll give it like a snowy covered look. Yeah, I think that's, trying to think if that's, and if you have like you know, even just like a cocktail strainer, that would work too, like a cocktail mesh strainer. I'm trying to think of what else you can have on hand, but that gives you like the finest texture of it if you're gonna sift it over the cake. But wait till it's fully cooled, otherwise that powdered sugar will just kind of dissipate and go away. Yeah, maybe do that later tonight before dinner. Are there any other questions?
Would this same recipe work if you wanted to do like little cupcakes with apples on top?
Oh, I haven't tried that, but I think you could do that. I
Really?
don't see why not. They would bake a lot faster. So I'd say maybe the cooking time, I'd probably keep it around like 20 to 25 minutes. Maybe I'd start and check it and see how it looks. I haven't tried that before, but I think it would definitely work if you wanted to do that. I should try that sometime. That's a good idea. I think I don't know if that would work out with the layer. It would be hard to layer an apple on top. Maybe if you like sliced it up really small. But thank you. Good question.
Are there any other questions?
Trying to think. Oh, you know what? I should talk about a little bit more about the like the blood sugar thing. So this is kind of something I'm learning a lot about this year in particular, because my baby Lila, who was born in February this year. She was a giant baby, like over 9.5 pounds. My husband's family just has very large babies, but I am a very small person, and so it was really difficult for me to carry her. And when she was born, I had a scheduled C-section because my son was so large at like 8.5 pounds. He ended up getting stuck, and so we learned to just go straight to C-section. Obviously, this is probably more than what you guys want to know, but my daughter Lila had ended up having a blood sugar regulation issues, as well as some issues like trying to breathe on her own and everything. And what everyone told me is that it's common in very large babies. They struggle sometimes just as much as like the very tiny babies too. But I was personally worried. I had passed all my glucose tests and everything like that, but a lot of nurses would just kind of make offhand comments that really bother me as someone who has a lot of health issues. And they would just kind of say like, oh, I wondered if you had misdiagnosed or undiagnosed gestational diabetes, which I hate that the medical system does that and puts that into your head sometimes when you're like, wait a second, like this never happened. So I asked my OB about it. She said sometimes like it does happen. Usually they would catch it with like how often I was going in for testing. But I did start working with a dietitian afterwards because it can be an issue if you are undiagnosed or if you do have gestational diabetes, and then after the baby is born, sometimes it can lead to you having your own personal issues and stuff like that. And I noticed my hormones with the second child I wasn't doing as great. And so I started working with a dietitian here in Dallas, and I learned a lot about like balancing blood sugar with just in your meals in general. And I think it can translate a lot to like people with migraine. I know it's been talked about a lot more recently, and it's been touched on in Migraine World Summit by some of the dietitians who've spoken. But it can make a big difference. And I'll notice if people message me and they'll be like, oh, have you ever found oats to be a trigger for people? Or, certain types of fruit, or, smoothies in general, or, a lot of people will blame like certain cookies or cakes or candy. And I'll always ask them like, well, how are you eating it? Are you eating it by itself? Or are you eating it, just as a snack? Are you eating it like at breakfast? Are you just having oats and nothing else? And usually that seems to be the case. And so I find that what I've kind of learned with working with this dietitian is that there needs to be sort of a balance in your meals of like a protein and a fat. And usually we don't even think of this like when we're eating a snack or something like that. But there have been some correlations too within studies of like migraine and blood sugar changes and spikes and stuff like that. So I always try to tell people like be mindful when you're eating like cookies and cakes and stuff like this, just to pair it with like a full meal and make sure you're getting a good amount of protein in there with it. Or even just like a snack, if you're going to eat it, eat like this apple cake, like, pair it with something with protein, like a cheese stick or something like that. And try to watch those blood sugar changes and everything to make sure that like that's not the actual cause of an attack, and that you're not like unfairly blaming a certain food. Because sometimes I think oats get a bad rap because of that, and it's because people aren't mixing in like, whether it's a migraine friendly protein powder or a seed butter or having it with eggs or something like that. They're just eating the oats on their own and mixing in oat milk sometimes. Like oat milk can be a big culprit of this too. I'll see like people put oat milk in their coffee and just do that for breakfast, and that can be an issue too. So just something to be aware of or to look into, or perhaps like, work with a dietitian on too, if you're noticing this. But I just bring that up because I think it's important too when we're talking about like food and food triggers and migraine and that sort of thing. Because I hate to see people unfairly blame certain foods,
Definitely. That's good information.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
I hope that
was
helps
wonderful.
someone.
Hey, Alicia, I have a question.
Yeah.
About, you were talking about reducing sugar. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I've been doing that for years, but anyway, you have to be careful how much you reduce, right? Because the baked product will turn out very differently and not as brown or all those things you want. So have you ever worked with any sugar substitutes?
No, and that's the thing. I get asked about it all the time. And I wish there was like I need to find like someone who bakes a lot with it. That's a good person. The dietitian I'm working with, she doesn't love sugar substitutes, but I know there are like some people who really do well with them and everything. I do think there's usually a conversion chart on the back, but I don't know how you would mix that into the recipes. So it's probably something I need to try in the future. I do think people have a preference for like monk fruit.
Yeah, I it was I didn't
not great. Yeah.
Not good.
And then stevia seems to be a really popular one too.
Yeah. I know.
But they do change the texture.
Right, about like, but with baking, you just don't know what you're going to get unless I guess you have a certain kind of recipe that's been checked out. Somebody wrote, I really like the Bestie products. I don't even know what that is.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I'll have to look into that.
It was me. So I've been chronic migraine for years, like many migraine people. So I've tried every single elimination diet that I've come across. And like you were saying, Alicia, for me, like it's not necessarily one particular food, but it's definitely more about having a steady blood sugar. And the most elimination diet I did was keto and just really cutting back those carbs. And again, I would notice the minute I took a bite of a cookie or a piece of bread, a little cheat, the pain just really spiked. And so I'm not keto anymore. Life is short. I'm in pain every day. I might as well eat a cookie. But like you were saying, I try to be really mindful about, okay, so cake tonight for dinner. So we're not going to have pasta for dinner. We're definitely
That's a really good point. Yeah, just try to balance it all. I do think life is too short, and like when you live with so much pain, you do have to figure out like how to balance this kind of stuff too. So that's a really good point. Yeah, because you don't want to feel like you're missing out on all these like fun things, especially making a cake like this. I mean, I'll probably go and drive half of this to our neighbor down the street, and it just makes such a nice gift. And so then you keep a little bit for yourself. This cake actually freezes amazing. So I've made it for several of my migraine friends, their birthday parties. And a lot of times I'll just, if I don't feel like making it like the day before or something like that, I'll just freeze it and defrost. And it's a really great cake. Yeah. Oh, I saw
we
a
have
question.
a question. Yeah, how's Lila now?
She's great. I mean, she's asleep right now. Today she stood up for the first time on like on we have a little stool that my son uses to help me bake. And she's got herself up on it for the first time. So I have a mover now. I have two little movers, and I don't know what I'm going to do with myself anymore. Life is about to get very interesting. So she's no longer going to stay where I like plop her down. But yeah, she's doing great. She's still a really big baby. She's like in the 90s, for everything. And she's a really easy baby. I think if I would have had her for my first, like I wouldn't have been as scared down again. It's just so interesting. Kids are just so different, and every pregnancy is so different too. Like with her, I had hyperemesis gravidarum, which I'd love to see if there's a connection with that and migraine. All my doctors have told me there's no connection. I don't necessarily believe that, because I feel like everyone I meet online, that they sometimes get pregnant and they have, especially girls, they seem to have, I've heard a lot, have a connection to hyperemesis. So Interesting. But yeah, she's doing great now. Thank you.
Good.
Spent about a week in the NICU, and that was terrifying, but we're happy to have that behind us now.
Well, thank you so much for this. This was excellent. And
Yeah.
stay tuned because we're going to be giving away 2 cookbooks today. But now I'm going to introduce Lisa because she's going to be doing our craft. So Lisa has been an integral part of Miles for Migraine the past few years. She leads our creative writing mindfulness series on Thursday evenings. She cares about awareness for migraine because she was undiagnosed for over 20 years. She now advocates for migraine. One of her most recent accomplishments with Miles for Migraine is helping us put together and lead our Dear Migraine book that has just been released on Amazon. If you have not purchased our book, it makes a great holiday gift for someone that has migraine, even for someone that does not have migraine, because it can really help them understand our disease. Lisa is going to lead us in our holiday craft, which should be a lot of fun. So Lisa, the floor is yours, and let's have some fun.
Thanks, Laura, and thanks, Alicia. I always love your cooking classes, and I learned so much. So hopefully I didn't screw it up, but we'll see. So today we're gonna learn how to make coffee filter snowflakes. And if you don't have coffee filters, you can watch along, but I'll also show like another option. But if you have this kind of white coffee filter, they're really actually wonderful for making snowflakes. And these are kind of the 4 stages where you start with a coffee filter and then you end up folding it and then you cut into it and then you can unfold it and decorate it. But if you don't have a coffee filter, you can kind of do what we did with the parchment and take a round object and draw a circle and cut that out. You can even use parchment paper, I suppose. So what you do is you take the filter and you want to just flatten it out and then fold it in half. And if you ever made a snowflake as a kid, it's similar. It's just really nice because you get the round shape. So you fold it in half so it should look like a half smile. And then you fold it in half again. And it'll look like a triangle with a round edge. And then you fold it one more time. And I'm going to call over my assistant. Olivia, can you help? It's your time to help. So if you have any children in the house, this is a great activity for them as long as you have child-safe scissors. Olivia, can you show our friends how to cut the snowflake? I'll hold your apple.
I need bigger scissors.
You need bigger scissors. Okay. Olivia has been trained in using bigger scissors. But if your kid isn't...
cut a snowflake.
Oh, yeah, Michelle has her scissors.
And you have to get something that looks like this. You take scissors and you cut the first bit. If not, you can do it like it. But this side, I am doing it this way.
Yep, you can cut the tip. I like to cut it in like maybe a little zigzag shape, but you can do it however you want.
So if you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah, you don't have to do it that way. That's right. And little diamonds can be nice. And you can cut any of the sides. When you cut the tip, you get the nice middle there.
Sometimes if you want, you can do this and do this. And then you kind of can do cut like a triangle.
Yeah, a triangle, or even like a lightning bolt shape, kind of like this. So you get like an interesting shape.
you cut across it, then your snowflake won't come as a snowflake. It'll just be broken.
Yeah, that's right. If you cut across it, it'll be broken. So make sure you leave some in the center here. And then Olivia, when you're done cutting, do you want to open yours? We can open ours together.
So you will look and see how ours will be done.
Here, hold it down just a little bit. See? And they can be really vastly different from each other and both be beautiful.
Look at mine. Mine looks prettier than yours.
Not a contest.
That's awesome. Now, do you also decorate those or do you leave them white?
So we usually leave them white. Olivia drew on one with a marker. And if you do that, just put it down on like another piece of paper or
Girlfriend on your counter.
yeah, you don't want to stain your counter. The marker will go through it. You can also glue little sparkles to them, but honestly, we usually just leave them white and tape them all over the house this time of year. It's really nice.
Yeah, because
Oh, Olivia, look at Michelle's. That's so pretty.
Yeah, let's have everyone hold them up.
Love how the center turned out, that zigzag.
I like the little triangles there. And
Something
Susan.
there for sure.
Natalia, you were brave with a big cut.
Yeah, mistakes were made.
That's okay. I mean, these come in like the hugest packs.
Happy accident.
But it kind of looks like a snow angel to me. There's Laura's.
These are really cool. I never would have thought to do it this way.
Yeah, it's funny. I learned it from her preschool when they did them last year. And so now whenever I get coffee filters for my own coffee, I'll get the white ones so we can make snowflakes. Susan, can you hold that up again? I didn't quite catch it.
Oh.
That's okay. And when you're folding them, you can fold it one more time, but you need to have nice, like, so it's really thin and you'll get like, and you can cut. So like, I wouldn't cut there the whole time, but you can cut like maybe 1 or 2 little diamonds there to have something even in the middle, if you want to get super adventurous, and then you can fold it back out to this shape.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because I have a patio door in my office, and I think that would be fun to like put those on the patio door just in the winter sometimes, because we used to have some spray that we would spray the windows to make it look like snow on the inside, but that stuff's really hard to get off.
Yeah, these are easy.
So,
just use a little Scotch tape. That's easy to take off.
Yeah.
Oh, Michelle just had like the most brilliant idea I've seen. She's going to use it as a stencil when she puts the powdered sugar on her cake.
Oh, that's beautiful. That would be awesome.
That's so cool.
Guys, this is one of my favorite projects to do with little kids. And something else you can do is just to try to stick to the folded side. That way it doesn't separate when you're cutting out the shapes. And then another thing, if you want to do like a wild, fun, colorful project, is when you use your markers on it, make sure they're regular markers. And then you could put it on newspaper and then use a water spray, like you used to water your plants, and like spray it on there and watch the colors run together. And the kids really love to see the results.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah, like
so
you can.
It makes it spread.
Yeah, like rainbows. Like you can tell them just to use like the primary colors and see what happens when the colors run together, like yellow.
Oh, neat.
Yellow and red, or make orange.
Purple.
And they love to see that. Make a colorful garland, or just string them together like a garland across the window or fireplace.
I don't know. talking, but these are great ideas.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Dawn. I wasn't able to, I'm not using my regular device, so it didn't show my name, but this is Dawn. I'm sorry. I used to be an art teacher and
That's so
specializing in younger ages before migraine.
That's so cool.
But yeah, and it's fun to like string them together to make a garland or hang them on the windows. The kids really love it because it's a what do you call it? Of course, I can't recall the words today, but it's a fun, productive project that all ages are able to do, and it has quick results, so it's not, you know, frustrating, and you know, it's very cheap.
Yeah. I mean, I forget how much the filters cost, but you get like a huge thing of them for very little money.
Yeah, and all ages love to do it, no matter your age. It's really great, preschool and up.
Well, I was just thinking, I have some of those scissors that have the patterns from scrapbooking, so that might even be fun to play around with some of these.
It's a little more difficult to use on this type of paper, but if you use like regular copy paper, it'll work. Just don't do too many folds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know.
And then if you want to go, you can do like add some glitter. That's fun too. To make a nice display. My name is Dawn, honey. I don't look very good today. So I turned off the picture. I was wearing the knit cap earlier. Yeah. So I turned off my picture. But yeah, I used to be an art teacher, so this is one of my favorite things to do in the winter time with kids. It's really fun.
So cool.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for sharing.
Well, everybody, I've been putting the links in the chat, so hopefully you've been seeing it, but I put the chat or the link for Alicia's website and then her cookbooks in there, and I'm going to put a link for the survey. I also put the link for the Dear Migraine cookbook on Amazon that you can get, so hopefully you can look for that. And then so let me put the survey, because we really appreciate your feedback so that we can keep doing events and see what you are in the mood for future events. And then our winners, we have 2 winners for cookbooks. So if I call your name, if you can please put your email in the chat, either a direct message to me, or if you're okay with it, just in the chat itself, so that I can mark it down and then we'll get in touch with you. So for your participation, Jamie V, and then Dawn for all of your helpful artistic hints. So congratulations on your prize. We will get you a autographed cookbook.
Oh, if it's Alicia's books, I'd like to go ahead and give it to somebody else because I actually have her books.
Okay.
But thank you so much. That's very kind.
Do you want to pick someone?
Oh, well, you can do that if you just want to close your eyes and pick on a square. Because I appreciate that so much.
Lisa, I'll let you pick.
Michelle, for her wonderful idea of the snowflake and the powder.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Great.
I actually already have the Mediterranean.
Do
you have the Disney Cook one?
I do have the Disney Cook Mediterranean cookbook.
Okay, quick.
You have the other
if you don't
one.
have it, put your name in chat right now and we'll give it to you.
I could send you the other one too, the Disney Cook cookbook.
Oh, yay.
It's more like comfort foods, or someone else can have the Mediterranean one, whatever.
It's very good.
I would love the original.
Okay, perfect.
It's a favorite.
Alicia, do you need me to send you these emails?
Yes, if you don't mind, please.
Okay.
And then
yep.
Whichever book they want.
Okay.
I can send either one of them. So
Jamie, what book would you prefer?
Or I can describe them too, I guess. So the Disney Cook cookbook is my original cookbook. It is the bestseller cookbook. it is a lot about like comfort foods, but they also follow like a migraine elimination diet if you're doing that. But then I have a lot of people who aren't doing that, who just love the recipes. And so it's kind of one of those cookbooks that's like good for anything. And we'll kind of like teach you a little bit more about reading labels and stuff like that. But it also includes my journey with vestibular migraine and like what different types of magnesium and what supplements I use, as well as like just comfort food recipes that follow those elimination diets, but again, are good for anything. And then the Mediterranean migraine diet one is one that I partnered with my neurologist on. He kind of goes through what foods are good to add in for migraine disorders. So like if you have just like for overall brain health. So it's less of like kind of like what foods should we not eat and more of what foods should you embrace to help with your overall brain health. So there's a lot of talk about omega-3s in there, as well as like dark berries, which can be good for your brain as well as memory. And so stuff like that. And then it goes over a little bit of what in the Mediterranean diet you kind of want to be aware of as far as what could potentially be like more triggering for people with migraines. So things like the Mediterranean diet is you can drink red wine, but like how that might be an issue for people with migraine. Or people like me who have an issue with yogurt. I give you substitutes. Like if you can't tolerate yogurt, this is what you can do. So you can also use it if you are in an elimination, but it gives you just edits both ways. So that one is more Mediterranean focused, like from that sort of eating plan, which is more of like a long-term way of eating for brain health. So yeah, pick out whichever one you'd like. I'm happy to send it to you, whatever fits your personal goals better. Yeah.
Yeah, so just put that in the chat, which one you want. Michelle, I have down that you wanted the first one. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Good
And
choice.
can you put your last name also? And then Jamie, which book did you want?
The Mediterranean one would be
Okay.
great. Thank you.
And then I have one shameless plug. I have a website that provides resources for migraine and brain injury, and I'm going to just put it in the chat. It's kind of a hub of resources. I have about 70 different links for different great resources from around the web. So I'm going to just put that in, and you can explore if you're wanting to, but I also provide women's support groups and virtual game groups and things like that. So if you're interested, you can stop by and take a look. But it's been a pleasure being with all of you today, and I hope you have a pain-free or less painful day, and I hope your cakes turn out. Like, please post on social media and tag us so we can see them.
Yes, I'm actually going to pull mine out just a little bit early so that you guys can see what it should look like. Obviously it'll need to be a little more brown, but I just want to show you. Oh, and I don't mind risking my cake. But you can kind of see it'll get a lot more golden brown on top, but that's kind of what it'll bake up to when it's finished. Okay, does that help? I hope so. Only bummer is it takes so long to bake. But your house should smell amazing right about now.
Thank you.
And I see a question, Diane, you asked if we could email the links. Can you specify which links you needed? Because I can definitely do that, or I can request that Miles for Migraine do that for sure. Yes, I will make sure that we get that. Can you put your email in the chat for me and I'll just email them to you real quick so that I make sure I get them to you? Perfect. I'm going to email them to you from my personal email, but I will send it right now. Otherwise I might forget and I don't want to lose things in the meantime. So hopefully that works for you. All right, everybody. Well, it was a pleasure and I hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday. So take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Be well.
Thank